Hello, we've got a luminary in the service management space, the business IT connection, and a person who's written, an author, writer, a speaker, and a person who created an industry title for himself called the IT Paradigmologist. So Mark Smalley here, who's actually who consults on service management using the gaming framework, and he's the author of High Velocity IT. He's had an illustrious career of 35 plus years, and the last 10 or 12 years, he does consulting and training with across the world with various companies in the space of service management, IT for IT, the business IT conundrum, and a very interesting guest we have today, Mark Smalley, who's originally from the UK but now settled down in the Netherlands. Welcome, Mark, to this talk, and it'll be great to hear your journey as to how you chanced upon coveting yourself with that IT paradigmologist title that not many have. Even if you Google, there's none out there except you. So,
Yeah, no,
which perhaps might take a form once it really becomes popular. Yeah, please walk us through your journey on how did you end up becoming what you are today. I also saw that in one of your talks that you said when you were working for somebody, your happiness level was at some point, and then when you started being a manager, it kind of dropped down like the Peters
yeah,
principle. You're pushed to the highest levels of your
yeah, that's right.
inefficiency.
That's right.
And then when you became a consultant and an IT parallel, it shot up again. So, so if you can quickly walk us through that journey, I think that'll be a huge value add for a lot of people.
Yeah, sure. It's by the way, I love your background. It's
Yeah, I
the
mean, it's a
one of the famous scenes in Amsterdam along the canals.
sure,
I'm
sure.
um, I'm based just outside Amsterdam. Amsterdam centre is about 30-40 minute bike ride to see the kind of scenery behind you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, great fun to be with you and have a chat about life and death and IT and stuff. Yeah, that you referred to that inflection point in my career when as many people do, you start off as a practitioner, you do stuff, you say, Mark, you're a great programmer. Why don't we spoil that by appointing you to be a manager? So as you say, you get promoted into positions. And although, because, this is just what life throws at you, life is about experiencing the things that come along and what you do with them. So I did, when I grew into various management positions, I very much enjoyed the challenges associated with dealing with people, helping people on their career, that in particular helping people to flourish, discover what they can do and get and help others in the process. um, but yeah, I'm a content guy, so after doing that, after various managerial roles for about 15 years, I guess, I decided, I'm missing something, and that's really where I cut the cord, pulled the plaster, um, ripped off the plaster, and because it was quite a difficult decision, in the sense that you built up a certain position in an organization. Your status is associated with your managerial position, so sort of drop in status, but my happiness increased enormously. And it was about that time, I think, I came up with the term, I forget exactly when, but that term, the IT paradigmologist, because if you dissect the word paradigmology, the study of paradigms, and paradigm is just a way that you look at the world. And that is something that I still find fascinating, taking different perspectives on things, trying to, it's the, it really, it's a lost cause. You're trying to understand something which is intrinsically meaningless, but that's what human beings do, don't they? We are meaning-seeking beings. We try and understand things, give things meaning, even if they don't have meaning. Otherwise, we feel unsettled. But it's just what I do. I was looking at different paradigms and trying to help people see things from a slightly different perspective, sort of possibly rethink how they view things. And that's gives me great pleasure if I can help people on the way. It's like I always remember when His Holiness the Dalai Lama was interviewed ages ago now, probably about 10 or 15 years ago. Australian journalist, he sticks a microphone in your face and he asks, what's the meaning of life? And the Dalai Lama comes up with some wise words saying, this really hit me, saying, meaning of life is about happiness and usefulness. A very simple message, but there's an awful lot of truth in there. In at least my interpretation is, if I make myself useful, it makes me happy. And that's the sequence. You don't strive for happiness directly; it comes indirectly. And in my case, it's if share knowledge with people in books or at presentations, stuff like that, then that gives me a great deal of satisfaction, and hopefully help somebody on the way. More on the content of what I've done, it might give us some talking points. Before I went off on my own as a consultant, I was at Capgemini, and with a series of acquisitions, which ended up in Capgemini, all the time with managed application service providers. So taking on people's applications, maintaining and managing them. And that was, I still find that of great interest, dealing with systems which are often quite old, difficult to manage. The term technical debt is used quite a lot recently. So people are, I think it's a great development that people are more conscious about the concept of technical debt. The things that you delay because you've got more important things to do, but they all sort of stack up. And at a certain point in time, you've got to bite the bullet and do some serious repairs. And there's interesting stuff in the site reliability engineering area, which I'm sure some of our audience will have heard of, where people are sort of balancing the effort they're expending on either, if lots of incidents are occurring, they'll spend more time on fixing stuff. They're trying to keep it in balance.
That's, I think, just to interrupt you, Mark, I think the way you said site reliability engineering, DevOps is one paradigm, and the next level of shift is the site reliability engineering, SRE, as they call it, which is like applying computer science engineers to solve operational issues, which is not, and that too from Harvard and Stanford and the MIT guys out there in Google and Microsoft and Facebook trying to solve operational issues using com science. So I think that's a very interesting field out there. But the normal stuff is, they say, getting a good SRE engineering is like a purple cow or something. You don't find them normally. But yeah, of course, that's the next paradigm that I suppose companies would want to aspire for. So whatever you aspire for over a period of time will definitely happen if it's there on your pipeline.
By the way, before you just mentioned purple cow, I'll just shift my camera a little bit. On top of my bookshelf, you will see
you do have a purple cow.
A purple cow.
And there's a book by Seth Godin by the same name.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I can see him as well. Yeah, his book as well.
That orange book there. This is marketing.
Sure. Correct.
Seth, for people who are interested, even for people who aren't interested in marketing because they think marketing is,
a dirty word, and
that's right.
Got a lot of negative connotations to it.
Seth is the marketer's marketer. He's absolutely brilliant. He's certainly brilliant at marketing himself. I always have great respect for professionals, whatever their discipline. See people doing a good job, whatever it is, you admire that, and he does an excellent job.
Yeah, I do love his one-liners that he regularly tweets, and on his own Typewad site that he just thought for the day. Brilliant stuff. Like, he just puts some 4 or 5 lines, and it's very thought-provoking and profound.
It is. He's extraordinary. I'm addicted to podcasts.
Okay.
And he has a weekly podcast. He always comes up with something interesting. And I've learned this as a writer. I used to, it was ages ago now. I used to write a weekly column for a little journal, and you know it. You've got a deadline. You've got to write something, and it's just a discipline, and you will find something. You
You'll
get
force
into
yourself
a
to write. Correct.
No,
Correct.
that's right. And you get into a kind of a rhythm, a routine
Correct.
that you're during the week. You're looking at sort of you're being observant of things. Oh yeah, could write about that. Could write about that. And but even if you got your deadline in a couple of hours and you haven't found something, you will write something. That's just how it works. So I think that's
True.
it's a great personal discipline. I think writing something, writing a journal,
Correct.
which people don't seem to do. I think I don't either, but it's that kind of stuff. I think this sort of personal discipline
I think the
is good stuff.
creativity just flows when you, as you said, when you have something approaching, you could actually mix and marry a lot of ideas in your mind, and what they call idea sex actually happens, and you could have multiple brilliant stuff colliding within, and then something really new takes birth over there. That it's very, as a creative guy who's into writing, I totally, I mean, I totally understand what you're saying. So
Yeah.
you can really have words just flow out of your fingers when the time is right, and it's all a nice feeling. I mean, you let out the creative urge in you. So
Oh yeah, no, yeah. And I had that yesterday. Somebody asked me to do a keynote for a conference in mid December, and I was thinking, yeah, what am I going to talk about? Um, and suddenly I started writing the synopsis, the abstract of the talk, and it just flowed. You know
oh,
that feeling where it's you don't really have to think about it much.
correct.
You've got a train of thought, and I wrote a
That's a
couple of
very
hundred.
nice feeling to be in.
Yeah, no,
Whenever it
that's right. It
happens,
was what they call it, saying being in the zone.
absolutely correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
and that thing about innovation, about having a deadline that forces you to do stuff. We've seen it with the pandemic. We've seen there's an urgent need to do something, and we are starved of our usual resources. It's interesting if you think about those two things. It's urgent and you're starved of your usual resources. You
Yeah,
will be innovative. You will come up with innovative things. It's like when
absolutely.
that ages ago when um, something failed in I think it was one of the Apollo missions, and they had to come up with a solution using stuff that was just available in the capsule, and they came up with a solution. And
Absolutely.
that's because that's really what pressure does. But coming back to Seth with his wonderful one-liners, um, it's something. In fact, in one of the books I've written, one of the recent books, the pink book there, High Velocity IT,
Yeah,
in the itil series, um, people like us do things like this. That's one of the things that Seth often says, and he talks about tribes. People who with similar kind of values.
true,
People
true.
like us do things like this, and you're encouraging people to enroll, to come on board, um, and thinking about what you can offer people. And so Seth certainly helped me thinking about the positioning the book and sort of pitching it to people. And the pitch I have for the book is it's called as you mentioned, it's called High Velocity IT. It's about IT service management in the broadest sense in organizations which are more highly digitally enabled than most organizations. So organizations that really use technology to help them do things significantly differently.
Mark, sorry to interrupt you. When you say digitally enabled enterprise, what's your definition of being digital? Because there are a lot of various definitions of the word digital. When people talk about it, they talk about it in various different contexts. What's your take of it in the book? Actually, when you say digital, what aspect of that have you dealt in there?
Yeah, no, it's a bit very, very astute of you to pick on that, pick on that word. It was, as we both know, when you teach stuff or when you write stuff, you learn the most because you have to think about things. One of the most elementary things that I came across at the start of the book, I think I knew it before then, but it forced me to articulate it, is people often talk about IT and talk about digital. You've got IT and digital. What are we actually talking about when we say digital? What do we mean? If you talk about IT, that's a noun. that's a thing. It's technology. You know, you can define technology. Digital is just an adjective. When you think from a semantic point of view, digital what? Okay, digital technology. But we often talk about digital as if it were a noun instead of an adjective. Digital technology. Okay, so what's the difference between information technology and digital technology? It took me quite a while to think that through. I finally came up with the idea that when we're talking about digital technology, you could say it's a combination of information technology and operational technology. Just bear with me for a minute, and if anybody's interested, it's in the book. And if they don't want to buy the book, they can either buy the book about the book. I wrote a book about the book I
That's
wrote.
the condensed version of the actual book.
Yeah, it's called Reflections on High Velocity IT, and it's available on Amazon for about $10
So
in the ebook.
the crispier version of the book, in case you
Well,
don't have what
it's
they call it, TDLR or something, like I don't have time to read the whole thing. So I might as well read the abridged version, the condensed version of the
it
book.
yeah, it's a bit of a summary, but it's my commentary. You could say it's a bit of a guided tour. I picked on certain things. I gave a bit more background, but if you don't want to buy that book
And
either,
what was the motivation to write that book actually, which was the condensed version of the thing? What was
it
your
wa-
personal motivation to write that?
I thought it would be fun to do. It
Oh,
was
okay.
during the writing of the book for Axelos, the owners of itil, they engaged me to write that book. It took about 9 months, 12 months, depending on where you put the borders. And I was sort of keeping notes during the process. I'd never actually written a book of that magnitude.
How many
Um,
pages is it, Mark? That one?
where it's not it's about 60,000 words to 200 pages.
Okay,
Um,
fairly
but
big.
it was more the complexity of the whole process, because
Do you
and
use any
this
research? Do you use any, sorry, do you use any researching tools, like you store them in OneNote or Evernote and then mix and mash your ideas, and or you use some distraction-free tools like, stay focused. I mean, so that you don't get any interruptions. Put your phone on silent. Early morning discipline when you write a book. That's off the topic, but
um,
yeah.
my personal rhythm is that I'm um, intellectually stronger in the morning. So if I have any thinking to do, any writing to do, it's best in the morning, and the afternoons are better organizing stuff, coordinating stuff. And in the case of the book, um, I think it's quite frustrating for Axelos, the owners, because they were asking me questions: how many words is it going to be? What's going to be in it? And I took a much more emergent approach to the book. I asked 50 people worldwide, 18 countries were represented. I asked 50 people at the start, so what do you think should be in the book? Doing a bit of crowdsourcing as far as the type of the topics is concerned. Then I engaged, I think it was 22 people I wrote about half of the book. The other 20 people wrote the other half.
Okay.
And it was a very loosely coupled author architecture, in the sense that there were multiple authors doing things in relative isolation. I asked somebody to write a piece about ethics, for instance. It was sort of fairly self-contained piece, and it was up to me to, if we take an IT analogy, I was the service bus, I was the orchestrator, I was pulling all these pieces together, I was convinced, although I didn't know what people were going to write, I was convinced, and I hope that it came off, convinced that at the end I would have a coherent whole, to be able to form the whole thing. So that was that was fun.
So the second book is solely yours. The first book was co-authored by 20 other authors.
Yeah, that's right. I was what they called the lead editor, because
Oh,
I was coordinator, but there were
okay.
22.
Okay.
But I was going to say, if people don't want to buy my book either for $10, if they look at my LinkedIn profile, on LinkedIn, I write plenty of stuff on LinkedIn. One of the articles is called "Here I Wrote This," and
Okay.
it's about the book, about the reflections book I wrote. And each week I publish an excerpt of the book for free. So if you don't want to buy my book, you can see. So if you're interested in
Follow you on LinkedIn. That would
yeah,
be a
that's
good
right.
place to.
But back to that digital thing. So digital technology into information technology and operational technology. I defined information technology as technology that gives people information which they use to, if you, it's interesting to think about information. What's the function of information? I don't know. What's the function of information? It helps you take better decisions. It reduces uncertainty.
Okay.
Reduce uncertainty. Oh, that's interesting. So instead of saying information technology, we could have chosen to call it uncertainty reduction technology. Strange thought. That's what it. But really, because even if you say information is about reducing uncertainty, you take better decisions, and then hopefully you act on those decisions. The interesting thing is, if you invest in information technology, it's only when somebody at the end of the chain acts on a decision that has been improved by the information that they derive from that system you built that they get return on their investment. If nobody does anything with the information in the sense of taking better decisions and crucially acting on those decisions, then no value is realized. So that's a sobering thought.
So you probably would like to call instead of information technology, uncertainty reduction technology is what it should actually be called as.
You could so you could make
So,
a case. So
and when you have a lot of choices, you're rather more confused than able to arrive at the right thing.
yeah.
That's what IT
No,
has led us into these days.
that's one of the strange things, isn't it, with information? If you get too much of it,
Too much of it, and
it
we are in the
confused.
age of information distraction. I think, as you said, there's too much of information all around us that it's very difficult to pick and choose what you should narrow down on, what you should focus on.
Yeah,
And
let alone the discussion about what is real, what has real value, what is fake. Is there
true, true, true.
what is truth?
True, true.
There are
So, was it Seth Godin who actually inspired you to write a book, or it was an afterthought to read his book and, as you said, build a tribe around creating an influence, build your tribe, and magic starts happening after that. Was it chronological like that, or
no, no,
you
no.
just chanced upon it
I
after?
I had been aware of Seth Godin for ages.
Oh, okay,
But I think this is the first book of his I bought, and it's a great book. This is Marketing.
okay,
Great stuff in there. There's also a lovely interview with him. I'll give you the link so you can share it with our audience. Interviewed by Maria somebody or other. I forget her
oh,
name.
Maria Forleo.
Yep,
Marie
that's right.
Forleo.
That's right.
Marie
That's
Forleo.
right. That's the interview. It's about an hour, I think, slightly less than an hour.
Correct,
Seth
correct.
talks about his book, and the nice thing about the interview is that it's on YouTube. That there are um, little nuggets of information that they print on the screen. If you just look at those things, those little gems from the talk, that will give you a great summary of the key points in the book.
Correct,
And
correct.
it's from a marketing point of view, he talks about the smallest viable audience, smallest viable market that you should be addressing.
Yeah, even if you
That,
have 10 followers, that's good enough to as a start, is what he says. So you can build on upon that. So you don't need 10,000 people to be in business. Even if it's 100 loyal followers, start off with that small iteration, and then keep iterating on it, add value to them, and then you have a tribe. Which is
yeah, if you have something that the other people would fit, if you have something that appeals to somebody, I have something that appeals to you. If you like it so much that you will tell somebody else about it because you're pleased with what I sold you, then you're onto a winner. You've got a great deal because you'll spread the word. But the thing is, Seth helps you to focus on something which is valuable for somebody.
true, true.
And and hopefully it just rolls on from there. No, he's got some great stuff, but
Yeah.
he certainly helped me. It was a lucky coincidence, I think, that his book came out at more or less the same time that I was writing my book, so it helped me do
I think
quite a
I
bit.
did chance upon an anecdotal story from Seth's writing on the TypePad website that he publishes. That was about uh, costume maker in Hong Kong. He just makes bespoke clothing, which is just a handful of them throughout the year, and he's got customers lined up on his doorsteps
Yeah,
year after year, month after year. He's booked months in advance, and he's not a, like the big shops out there, big brand labels who are like churning out stuff. But he just makes bespoke, handmade stuff, which has got a touch of the heart and soul of the artisan on the cloth. And there are people lined up to buy that. So that's what Seth says. Like if you put love into what you do, the world would definitely need it. And though it might take time to build a tribe around it.
yeah, and it's another thing that I borrowed from him or adopted from his thinking is how I talk about the book High Velocity IT. I say that it's guidance that matters for people like us who care, and that's you can say that's a glib marketing slogan, but it's something that I believe in. It's if you think about what motivates people about people are looking for meaningful and rewarding work, um, and so they're looking at things in the book. I talk about 5 aspirations. People want to help customers get their jobs done. The raw satisfaction of helping somebody at the end of the chain who's got a problem, to help you. They want to trust and be trusted at work.
So, do you
They
use this concept of psychological safety, Amy Edmondson's principle over there as well? Mark, have you referred to that in the book? You have.
yeah, psychological safety and stress prevention at
Oh,
work,
okay. Yeah.
and um, the good thing I think in the industry, IT service management industry, DevOps as well, I've noticed it, is that people are interested in talking about these things. And I think that's a significant change compared with maybe 5, certainly 10 or 15 years ago. People are more concerned about other people, and I think certainly with the pandemic, um, people are under pressure. We talked about the inspiration that has come from the pandemic because there's an urgent problem. Our normal resources are constrained, so people come up with creative solutions. Um, but people are more concerned. It's about what people often call it the triple bottom line: not only profit but people and planet. So talking about environmental concerns as well, but being more concerned about giving employees a good experience, because if you've got happy people, you're going to have happy customers as well. That there's significant statistical research that indicates that when people are happy, you're going to have higher profit and higher customer satisfaction. That's been well established. So it's really the place to start. Make sure
I
you've
was
got to,
just before you, Mark. I was interviewing 2 other people. One is Mr. Ravi Gilani, and the other one was Charles himself. It wasn't Charles, I think somebody else. They were mentioning about this self-managed teams. So, which is like you're quite autonomous. We have management but no managers. So
yeah.
the companies out there. Like there is this company called Morningstar in California, which is a tomato sauce making stuff. Then there is Zappos, the famous shoemaker,
Hmm.
and then there is WL Gore and Associates in the US, who make a lot of medical equipment and all. So all of these guys have been self-managed like for the last 30 years and still doing extremely great on innovation. They don't have any formal reporting. There's no manager out there, and I think that's the industry is gravitating towards that level of psychological safety. And I also happen to write a article which is going to be published in an agile culture book on psychological safety about the same thing. So I think that's a nice place to be in, because, as you said, if you can derive joy from your work without the strings of the previous hierarchical world of reporting and all of that, which actually has a huge impact on employee creativity and productivity. So, what's your experience? Have you come across self-managed teams? Are there companies like that in the Netherlands who actually have self-managed teams? Probably this is outside of it, but since we chanced upon this, I'm talking about that.
Yeah, it's I think it's pretty universal, but with I forget who said it. The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, so you find it in pockets all over the place.
True, true.
But it's the concept. One of your other interviewees, Charlie Betts, um, often makes the point that that small teams are probably the most effective
Yeah,
unit of the economy. You know, you have
McGregor, actually, the US colonel or captain, I think,
yeah,
he is the guy who actually came up with that. Uh, McGregor. Yeah,
yeah. It's the assertion that if you have a team of about, I don't know, 10 or 12 people, you can perform wonders because you all know each other well. You collaborate pretty well. And
true.
there's a movement within the IT industry, particularly in more the agile in the software development space, to have multidisciplinary product development teams where you have roles like the product owner who represents business interests and is closely works closely with all of the other roles as well. That's that is a very effective. But in order, but that's about trust. I mentioned the desire to trust and be trusted. That you certainly need a high degree of psychological safety to work effectively, to have those kind of teams. There's a academic, Dr. Christina Maslach, who's done a lot of work on stress.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
she
think, yeah,
probably come across her. She talks about they used to send canaries into coal mines to see
yeah,
whether the
yeah.
canary would die, to be
Absolutely. Yeah,
safe.
yeah.
And
Correct, correct.
she said we don't we and comparing it to the workplace, we don't want more resilient canaries. We want less toxic workplaces.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I
very
thought
true. Yeah, that
that's a
was fantastic, actually. True, very
great
true.
way of putting it. Yeah.
The
So you
coal
could,
miner was quite healthy before he stepped into the mine, and after that, he's got all kinds of diseases and sickness and illness. So that's how toxic workplaces are these days, too.
yeah,
Very
you could have protect yourself, could have personal protection equipment to work in some workplaces because it's just not a healthy place to be. So
correct.
the fact that we leaders recognize this, are sensitive to this, are fostering this kind of climate, I think is very good. I remember it was quite touching. A guy, it was a few years ago now, I was at a conference in Wellington, New Zealand. I think it was project management conference, and a guy talked about social anxiety at a conference. So this guy who's sort of a bit of an introvert
This was
engineer.
this is how long ago? The social anxiety thing.
I think this is 3 or 4 years ago, so
Okay.
fairly
So,
recent.
okay.
Um, but the
Netflix has
fact,
a series called Social Dilemma now, so which
yeah,
just talks about
I
versus.
haven't watched it,
Correct,
but
correct. But
I've
it talks
heard,
about the same thing. Devices are making us more anxious, making us less connected with people, and that emotions, warm emotions within people are lost.
no, that's right. But I thought the joyous thing was that this guy was actually talking about that, felt comfortable talking about that at a conference. So talking, I think about 50 or 60 people in the room, maybe more. That must have been quite an experience for him. But the fact that our industry is encouraging people to talk about their feelings, um, and with psychological safety, what you're trying to do, you're trying to make better use of the values that people have, make sure that people don't feel concerned that their reputation or position will suffer when they share their opinions about things. So it's also about safety as well. If you think about not sure whether this is exactly applicable, but the tragedy with the Boeing 737 Max that happened some years ago, where software seemed to be part of the problem. You can imagine a situation where the software engineer possibly had doubts about the software, but were they confident in expressing their concerns to the organization? I'm not saying that this happened to Boeing, but I simply don't know. But if there was a toxic environment in which people were hesitant to share their concerns, and as a consequence, these things happen, then you've got a serious problem. So it's good, I think, in the industry that we're talking about that and trying to get people to voice their concerns. There's a guy who I've learned an awful lot from, and in fact, who contributed to the High Velocity IT book. He wrote the bit about ethics, which is very good. Dave Snowden,
Oh, okay.
who
Dave Snowden.
some people know from
Kennefin.
the Kennefin framework,
Correct.
sense-making framework, which helps you understand the nature of the organizational systems that we work in.
He's quite cerebral in his rants and very intellectual stuff about a lot of things. Yeah, very true.
Yeah, no, he drives me mad. Because I bless and curse him. He's taught me so much. Sometimes he's so far out in his thinking, it's difficult to.
Yeah, I think he talks about just as flow is important in organizations, equally important is the virtue that should flow in the organizations. So things like that.
Then that's one of my favorite quotes in this piece about ethics. But very quickly, Dave. The thing about ethics is Dave says technology has an unprecedented impact on our society and the economy. So technology is increasingly important. Second point is there will always be unintended consequences from our actions. When we do things, we can't predict what's going to happen. Things will happen for better and for worse. Third thing is we are responsible for our actions and the unintended consequences. What follows from that is the fourth point, is that organizations should therefore monitor the kind of behavior, the things that happen, the ethical behavior in organizations. And that leads into the fifth thing, that final thing, that ethics should be a core part of the education. But with respect to that fourth point, that organizations should track ethical behavior, it says just as organizations track their cash flow, they should also monitor the flow of virtue through the organization. I thought that phrase, the flow of virtue, that's such a lovely, it's good, and it's good that we're in the industry that we think more people are thinking about these kind of things.
Absolutely. So I think when you really add value in a meaningful way, revenue is a good consequence of it, and it should not be the primary one, wherein you focus on that and lose all the values in life, and you sell your soul and feel very discontent at the end of the day, working for people and organizations. But I think it's good that I just chanced upon the fact that there are companies like this which have been like that for 30, 40 years, and very high on the innovation curve, and a $4 billion company, WL Gore and Associates. The founder himself was actually chucked out from one of the companies because his ideas were too radical, and he set up in his house garage a company, and now it's a $4 billion company, which, like, since he had the pains of bad management, he said, I'm going to start a company with no managers at all. So everybody has freedom to do what they can do and all that. So they've been there. I think you can Google them up, and very interesting case study.
Yeah, there've been a couple of examples of those kind of firms. The question that you always have to ask yourself is that replicable?
True. Is it sustainable?
Yeah. Because everything has a curve. Things go up and things go down. It's just the way of things. It's with people and things and organizations. There's a certain certain curve to development. So how long will it last? And one of the things that I've learned, one of the many things I've learned from Dave Snowden, is the tendency to think that what happened in another organization, how they had success, that I could replicate that and have success myself, which is often not the case, because you've got completely different circumstances. So he does encourage you to to be very cautious about best practice as a concept. What happened for you? And it goes back to, I'm sure many of our audience will be familiar with lean principles. If you look at the lean movement, the Toyota production system, generally seen as the precursor of the lean movement, and one of the major figures in TPS, Toyota production system, was Taiichi Ono, legendary figure in the lean movement, who says, he came up with some great sayings, and one of my favorite quotes is, you have to face your own difficulties and think for yourself. Stop trying to borrow wisdom, which I think is what Dave Snowden was saying. You look at best practice, what worked for them
Need
won't
not work for
necessarily
you.
work for you. It even might not work for them again,
True, true.
because their circumstances have changed
Have
as
changed.
well.
Very true.
So it does make you very conscious of the uncertainty of things. We have the desire to like to feel that we're in control. And certainly managers like to have at least the illusion of control, but it's often not the case. Well, you go back to Machiavelli. If you reread Machiavelli, what his thinking in the 16th century, absolutely spot on as far as human nature is concerned. Some key points, and he says, I think one of his key statements that I remember is that half of what happens to you is just due to, he calls it fortune, just what happens, coincidence, and don't think that you can think that you can control things. You've got to take it step by step. Continually evaluate how your actions have changed the situation and take the next step. Very cautious in that.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And what about the fact that you named your book as the High Velocity IT? Was it because DevOps is speeding up the dev and operations, and like IT companies are churning out code like Netflix is churning code like 12,000 builds a day, and Amazon is like reached 20,000 builds a day. So was that the premise behind naming it like that, or is it the demand and supply needs are so high now that unless you're churning it at that speed, you are simply out of business? So was DevOps a good push to for that title to be there like that?
Yeah, DevOps was certainly one of the influencing factors. The title of the book for me was a given. The owners had thought up that title, so I had to work with that, and it was fine. There's one comment I'd like to make is that when you say high velocity IT, it could seduce you into thinking that there's high velocity and low velocity, and that high is good and low is bad.
True, true.
Simply not the case. It
Correct.
depends on what kind of velocity is appropriate for your organization.
Absolutely. I think
So
that's very good point to say that, because it might mislead people, and Don Reinstein's work on flow
yeah,
dynamics in the organization, that'll also push in saying, like, as you said, optimize all the resources, push them to the limit, and then you'll have great productivity. In fact, you are reducing on your productivity if you really do that, as you said. And so you
yeah, no,
should.
you've got to look at the big picture. Think about the theory of constraints. To look at the whole system and see where's the weakest link. So more accurately, we should have called the book Higher Velocity IT, because not high, but that just not as sexy as from a marketing perspective. So it's High Velocity IT. Going back to one of your first questions regarding the book, digitally enabled organizations, but by which I mean organizations that use technology to do things significantly differently, or do significantly different things because technology enables them to do that. So it's organizations that depend more heavily on technology than most organizations. That requires a different way of thinking about IT and a different way of working. And what we try to do with the book is give people examples of how highly digitally enabled organizations, how they think about IT, and the kind of practices, the kind of techniques that they apply. Stuff like you mentioned Don Reinertsen, his concept of cost of delay is one of the techniques I reference in the book. There's stuff from the DevOps community, stuff from the Agile community as well. In fact, I was quite pleased with the diversity of the contributors to the book in the sense of where they came from, because about a third came from the IT service management domain, which is what itil is really about, a third from either Agile or DevOps or both, and a third from outside outside IT completely. Like to take an example, Professor Jeff Liker, who wrote the book The Toyota Way, which is about management in the manufacturing world. It's not about IT at all, but he wrote a piece for me in the book. And Dave Snowden, although Dave does understand IT, it's not really his core domain. So I tried to get, and I got an Austrian design thinker, for instance, to write a piece about design thinking. So I got a diverse people with diverse backgrounds, and I think that helps to give people broader perspective on things.
Okay. Mark, do you also touch upon the fact that a lot of ethics are under question now as more and more systems are going digital? Like I did chance upon in one of your talks that there is a pedestrian, and if there's an autonomous car on the road, the decision whether you hit the guy or you hit the wall and then avoid the. So it's a very rich ethical question to ask. How do you design systems? So in both of the cases, there is loss of life. So on whose side are you on, and how do you make that decision in terms of ethics as more and more systems go digital?
Yeah, it's a classic trolley car dilemma that
True,
many
true,
people will be aware of. And this trolley car was out of control, and it's going to kill 7 people on the track if you don't do anything. But if you pull the lever, then you'll divert it, and it will only kill 2 people.
true.
What should you do? And if you extend that, you say, oh, yeah, of course, 2 is better than 7, so you pull the lever. And then you say, well, you see this trolley car, you're on the bridge, you see this trolley car coming towards those 7 people, and there's a guy standing next to you, big fat guy. And I think, if he were to fall on the track in front of the trolley car, he'd stop the trolley car, and that would prevent 7 people being killed. So should I push this fat guy over the bridge onto the track so the trolley car won't? Of course I shouldn't pull it. Oh, I can't do that. But it's utilitarianism. It's about one life against. So, but it really, and I think this is one of the things we explored in the piece about ethics and morality. It doesn't. These things, you have ethical frameworks. These don't give you the answers. They just help you take the least worse option. But they help you, and one of the bits of guidance in the book, we try not to be too prescriptive in the guidance, in the spirit of Taiichi Ono, who says you've got to think for yourself. We try to give people examples.
You have to fight your own battles.
Yeah, that's right. So but we do encourage people to just discuss these dilemmas and decide for themselves which is the best or the least worse course of action to take. You can't do much more than consider as much as the thing. What I like to do, I hope that this will broaden people's perspective, give them more information to consider, and hopefully take a better decision.
Okay. And how is this when you're designing systems these days? There's this human-centered design that is actually becoming popular in the business IT connect. So how much of that is actually there in the book when you say in the human-centered aspect of it, especially when you're designing systems, design them with empathy, think that there is actually a human who's going to consume it. And I'm sure a lot of your work in business IT, when you say it's a tango out there, and then you should be co-creators of the value that you both enjoy, the consumer as well as the producer. So how much of that has been actually dealt with in the book, or even otherwise? What's your take on human-centered design? And I think there's a lot of that actually happening in companies. They're sending exodus of employees. I'm sure I myself have come across a lot of companies that are sending a lot of people on design thinking workshops, so that they have that spirit of design in what they really do. And empathize with the people who are finally going to use your products and solutions. So what's been your experience in that area?
Yeah, there are a couple of chapters or sections in the book. One is about design thinking, one is about service experience. But after writing the book, it's a fascinating topic. It's one of the enduring topics that interests me, the concept of service, and how intricate, how delicate the mechanisms, the interactions are, just as we are interacting with each other, and we're reacting to slight changes in expressions and stuff. That's how service happens. Everybody as individuals knows how the service experience can be influenced by the tiniest of things, can either make it or break it, depending on subtleties. And when we talk about the human digital, so you've got human interactions, but also human digital interactions. When you're dealing with a chatbot or a pre-programmed telephone system, telephone tree. And a while ago, I wrote a little piece about saying that bad customer service often depends on is caused by uncompromising algorithms or inconsiderate people. You've got
Right.
algorithms which just don't accommodate me as a person or my situation. I don't fit into the box. We all know that feeling. You get it with surveys as well, where people ask you survey questions, but your answer isn't there. It's just not applicable to me. So you're forcing me to give an answer to something that hasn't happened to me. So there's uncompromising algorithms, inconsiderate people. With the inconsiderate people side, that interests me as well. The concept of empathy, and I've done a little bit of reading on that, a bit of modest research, and the takeaways is insights for me about empathy. People distinguish between cognitive empathy and affective or emotional empathy, the two kind of things. Cognitive empathy is more analytical, more rational. It's having the understanding of the customer journey.
Okay.
So where am I in the customer journey? Am I at the start? Am I at a decision point? As a supplier, with your experience of various customers, you should know where I am and the kind of concerns that I have. What information do I need? Am I feeling uncertain at that point? What kind of decisions should I be taking? That's all very rational, that you anticipate where I am. You provide me the information I need. That's fine. That's the easy stuff.
Effective is the more intangible ones. Typically, how do you feel
right.
about it? How do you
Yeah, that's
feel about
right.
it?
How do you feel? And I've had I just realized last week I had a couple of experiences with service. Um, One of the global transporters packages, um, fouled things up. Technically, the guy delivering the stuff did a bad job because he didn't deliver it. He came before the predicted time, so I wasn't at home. He left one of their pre-printed notes with various options and didn't bother to tick the option whether it was going to back to the sender or something or other. But then once I got in touch with customer service, there was not a grain of understanding of the situation that I was in. No understand. I'm sorry about that. No apology, no recognition. So it was so it made it even worse. And then the next experience with somebody else, one of the first things, in fact, it was I'd like to mention them. It was Amazon.
Oh,
It
okay.
was because the guys who fouled it up with DHL, they made a mess of the delivery, so the thing wasn't delivered. It went back to the sender.
Typically, Amazon is known for great service, but yeah, I think it was
It was my first interaction with Amazon. I
okay.
thought, enormous company like Amazon, they're not going to foul it up with an inconsiderate algorithm. I'll be dealt with as a number. One of the first things that the agent said was something like, "I'm sorry about that. Sorry to hear that." which, you know, it resets the scene. There's a human being who's showing, although they've probably been trained to say that. It's one of the, it might even be scripted, but it certainly gives, it's not, I don't care. It gives me the impression that somebody, even if it's the person who has scripted that, somebody has said, somebody who's calling is not calling for a reason, probably pissed off. So do something to recognize his or her humanity. And so you get these different. So it was great, and she dealt with it wonderfully, and got the package the next day. So but just those tiny little things, that recognition, that affective empathy, which to a degree you can train, but it does help if it's in your genetic makeup. It comes more naturally to some people than to others. But I think one of the messages for the industry is that, you're dealing with human beings. We should be more cognizant of the feelings they have, the situation there. There's I forget who said it. Oh, there's a guy, Russ Roberts, who does a podcast called Econ Talk. Been doing it for ages, I think about 20 years now.
What is it? What's it, Mark? What's his name?
Econ Talk.
EKON.
ECON Talk. Economist. Russell Roberts. Yeah, fabulous. It talks about about an hour, usually, in depth. He's a great interviewer. He often doesn't agree with people, but he likes to learn another person's position. He's very good on dialogue. So it's interesting from you as an interviewer. You would probably pick up a lot of techniques from him. So understanding how you let people express the things, how you sort of challenge them in a respectful way if you disagree. It gets a great conversation going. One of the things that he often quotes is, people are in a battle. Be kind. Everybody's in a battle. There's always something. You're in a battle, I'm in a battle. I don't know your battle, but
you don't know how good or bad that guy's journey has been. So be kind to everybody.
Yeah, be kind. Be kind. True. He also, he's quite a fascinating guy. He's you probably know Adam Smith, the guy who wrote The Wealth of Nations, economics. Ages before that, 10 or 15 years before that, he wrote a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiment. I think that's what it's called. It's fascinating. And Russ Roberts has written a book about that book. I realized that I don't think that inspired me to write my book about the book, but he said something how you can improve your life, how Adam Smith can help you improve your life. One of the things that Adam Smith says in that book is that people desire to be loved and to be lovely. To be loved and to be lovely. You have to just explain his interpretation of lovely. Deserving love. So having done things for the right reasons. So coming into the realm of morality. And that was another nice little takeaway from Russ Roberts and Adam Smith, that insight into human nature. People want to be loved, but for the right reasons, doing the right thing. And
yeah,
that's also
actually, that kind of collaborates with what I know Zappos does. Actually, they actually have the name of the guy and the physical, not his alias or something, the real name and real phone number on their website. In case you get into a problem, you can reach out to a real human who will talk to you, understand your problem, and help you out. So probably that is the reason why they're valued so highly than the other companies.
And they have these legendary stories about, I think, about the longest customer service call, which I think was 17 hours.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, look it up. So where many call center agents are pressured to close a call within a certain time limit, they are encouraged to make the call as long as possible, as long as the caller wants to talk.
True, 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 true. I think this is completely lost, this aspect of it, when they move the call centers to places like India, China, or Philippines or Manila, wherein no, the guy is saying, "Okay, did you watch the NFL match yesterday?" And this
Yeah,
guy's like, his name is Mark. He says, "I'm Mark here." Probably his actual name is something else,
yeah.
but they say, "I'm Mark here. What can I help you with?" And he says, "Okay, did you watch the NFL match yesterday?" And like, oh, this guy is like completely out of context, and that guy is expecting him to at least know what happened with that match, that kind of stuff. So I think if you're not in that space, if you're not able to empathize at that level, then you've lost the game in terms of a truly good service, as you
Yeah.
said, the human
But
aspect
it,
of
but
it.
it's such there's another legendary story about a lady who brought and I'm not sure whether this is true or not, but it's sort of goes around in the service industry that some old lady brings back snow chains to a store. It's I forget the name of the store. That was the whole point, because about the great service that the store gives. It'll drop in a minute. Um, and the guy says, what did you pay? Do you have the receipt? And I don't have the receipt. What did you pay for them? $20 or whatever. And he gives her the money. Turns out that this store never sold snow chains, but it was situated in a place. The previous store did sell snow chains. So the lady unknowingly came back to the same location, but a different store, and they gave her her money back. So why would you do that? Because
Okay,
you
so
value her custom.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think the brand is, she associated with the brand more than the shop itself. And then I think the current owners probably wanted to have her as a retaining customer, and probably that's the reason why they paid her up, even though they were not obliged to pay her up, I suppose.
No, but it's just the thing of taking people seriously. You don't.
Okay.
It's don't I think it was the same thing with the experience I had with Amazon. It was no questions asked. I should, filed up the delivery. I wasn't home. I could have lied. I could have been lying. Maybe I wasn't home. No, no questions asked. Send them a new product, which
Yeah,
they
I
did.
think.
And I thought, that's great. That's great service. I was really surprised with that.
Yeah, I think I have a fascinating story here from a guy called Mustafa, who actually makes idli. I'm not sure it idli is a traditional Indian
Yeah, breakfast.
steamed breakfast,
Yeah,
steamed food sort of stuff.
yeah.
So he was one of my colleagues in one of my previous companies, and now he owns a big conglomerate kind of stuff, which makes idli stuff. So he during the pandemic he started a movement called trust based selling, which means he's going to dish out all of his idlis and all of that batter in the apartment complex, or wherever he wants to sell his stuff. He leaves a truck there and a money box next to it. And it so happened that he says that in a place like India, where there is so much of economic disparity, and people are not very fair sometimes in terms of repaying what they have taken. So people said, they challenged him, like, if you create this trust-based selling, is it going to work in a place like India? People are going to walk away the product and probably not pay their due in the box there.
Mm.
So to surprise of surprise, he said the first few weeks, 80, 90%, 95% of the people actually paid. 5% of the people dropped in dummy coins and stuff like that inside that.
Yeah.
And that went on for, and 3 weeks later, they found currency notes of 500 to 1,000 denominations in that box, out of the guilt that, we actually enjoyed the fruits of somebody else's labor, and why should we not pay back? So they could find, because there's no way a guy needs to put 500 or 1,000 rupee notes in that. And they could figure out that the guys who actually did not pay anything in the first 1 or 2 weeks, were the guys who would have dropped that money out of the guilt, sheer guilt. And he
Yeah.
says that's a huge marketing opportunity that the companies need to follow, and the likes of Amazon also can follow these days. He says if you go through our retailer chain before the COVID, their profit margin is only 75%, because they have to share their revenue with the retailers and all that. and now it's a trust-based selling. He says their profit margins are 90 to 92%, which is a huge uptake than what was there. So even money-wise, you win trust as a brand. And he says Amazon can very well actually do that with the trust-based selling with some kind of physical stores, where they have this model. So I was just watching him talk on one of the shows, and then he brought out this idea.
Yeah,
Uh,
oh, that's great. Yeah, that trust thing is such an interesting concept as well in relationships. There's a Dutch saying where I'm based, the Netherlands, trust comes by foot, but leaves by horse.
oh
So
yeah,
to build
very easy to lose trust.
yeah,
True.
that's right. It takes a long time to build it, but it can vanish pretty quickly. And doing some thinking about trust, you think about, why do I trust you? Why do I trust you? And trust your ability, your technical ability to do something. Do we have similar kind of values? So in integrity, in the sense of, are you true to your values, and do your values appeal to me? Benevolence is a concept in trust. Do you seem to have my interest in mind beyond what we've contractually agreed? Are you investing in that? Really, are you doing something
True.
which I could take advantage of? It was really what that guy did. He put the box. Somebody could take advantage of his offer, but most people don't. So good for him. You can
Yeah.
also ask the question. We talked about the curve of things. How long will that last? Is that just a
True. True.
temporary situation, and will people start abusing it?
But
Will
he
it?
had a point, Mark. He said that he said in any case, there are going to be 7 to 8% defaulters, guys who are not going to put any money into that box. But
Yeah,
he says the cost of marketing, the cost of gains is much higher than that cost,
yeah,
because he's gaining 20% straight away now, more than the thing. So even if he takes off that, it's a very minuscule marketing cost that he is throwing it away. And he says that I really don't mind. So that kind of stuff. So all of
yeah.
us can benefit from the
I
trust-based
bet.
selling in this world.
I bet he found lots of notes that that your government took out of circulation a while ago.
Yeah. True. I think probably, yeah, the demonetization stuff,
Yeah,
news story and stuff like that. So he said he's actually planning to do that in the schools also, not just with adults in schools. So he's going to put coconut water and the buttermilk in the bottle stuff, and then he'll just give them a QR code. The kid can go and tell his dad that today I just
yeah,
picked
yeah,
up. They're not going to pay you upfront. The pay is going to come probably a week later or 2 or 3 days later. But still, he feels that's going to work and succeed, because once you create a trust-based, the bonding is very good, with your community and with your tribe. Like what Seth Godin also says, once your tribe, you've got a set of loyal followers, and the tribe is built and the trust is built, then
yeah,
selling is a no-brainer. Like people are already sold on you,
yeah,
that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. No,
So
it's excellent point. Yeah,
that is what is. I think that's really good. And when you chanced upon this, what I just want to check with you, Mark, on your work with ASL, BISL, because that's something very new to me as well. Because only after reading up on your profile, I knew there is an organization like that. So what do they do, and do they have some certifications and things that you can get certified on, and what typically
yeah.
happens there?
There are two bodies of knowledge that the organization developed. It's a not-for-profit foundation, started in 2004, I think. So it's been around for quite a while. The ASL Application Services Library body of knowledge is about application management from a provider perspective. So people who maintain and manage applications, how do you do that? You could say software development life cycle, but after the system's been built, the 80% of the costs that happen after the system's been built. The more interesting one, I think, is the BSL stuff, which is about not about what the provider does, but what the consumer does. So if you think in the traditional business and IT divide, you have business people who need stuff, get it built, and then use it. What kind of practices, what kind of things should they do in order to fulfill their part of the bargain, to come up with the right kind of specifications, the right kind of hypotheses, in the sense that you've got a business problem. If we do this, then this will solve it. So a hypothesis.
So is
Then
it similar to the, sorry to interrupt you again, is it similar to the BRM, that is business relationship management thing that is already there? There's a framework called BRM. So is it something similar to that, or?
Yes and no. BRM, the BRM Institute is more about the relationship between business and IT, and fostering a value creating relationship. The BSL framework is more about the content, more about the transactions, what you do. So thinking about the kind of specifications, making sure that the developers actually understand it, the role of the business in testing stuff. So more on the acceptance.
Okay, so this is all the way from the software lifecycle, the ASL, BISL part.
Yeah,
the other one is post delivery, is what I'm assuming.
But it's both pre and post delivery. That's an interesting thing, because you could say, if you take the software development activities and software and the IT provision, IT service provision, you could say that there's a prequel to that before development gets started. But people have to think about what do they want developed. But after the system is up and running, or actually when the system is up and running, the system is being used. But you can seriously ask yourself, I think our audience could ask themselves, if you think about your users, are you confident that they actually understand the systems? Two aspects: A, how to use the system, functionality. So, what does the system actually do? Where do I find the buttons, and how do I use the system? But the second one, possibly more crucial, is, do I actually understand the information that is presented to me? When we talk about a customer in the system, sort of using the word customer to designate a field or an entity, is that just a current customer? Is that previous customers? So how do you define a customer? So do people actually understand the significance of the information? Because with my idea about uncertainty reduction, it's only when you understand information that it helps you take better decisions. So that BSL framework helps you think about, are you helping the users to play their role and actually get value out of the investment? So it's taking the more the demand perspective than the provision perspective. That's the essence of the BSL framework.
Okay, do you have some bit of design thinking involved in that aspect when users are co-creating value there? Are you some kind of customer journey mapping or something like that being done there to facilitate that as a framework?
No, that is no. I should mention I was involved with the foundation for about 12 years, I think, but we've parted. It's been about 2 or 3 years since we.
So you're not updated on that right now.
So I'm not quite sure where they actually are at the moment, but just that, I think making people aware of the concept. In our industry, we have lots of guidance. The majority of guidance is for people who produce IT systems and run IT systems. There's very little guidance for people who actually need them and use them.
Okay.
So that's something to think about.
Okay, and talking about this business IT thing, I had one nice observation from one of your talks, which talks about SLA disarmament. So can you just mention what that whole thing is? Because you've heard about nuclear disarmament and all that, but
gosh,
what's
yeah.
SLA? Yeah, because everybody says that good governance can come from good SLAs and all, and you're out here on the contrary saying they should be disarmament of SLAs.
Well,
so what is that?
Yeah, it's interesting. You've certainly done your research. I credit you for that. That was a talk I did in the UK, I think in London, at an IT SMF conference, and I made the statement: ban the SLA. I think half of the audience applauded, and the other half started throwing rotten tomatoes at me because it's a very controversial statement to make.
And that too in an ITSM conference.
Yeah, well, because SLAs are a pretty fundamental part of IT service management. You agree things with the customer, and that's what you adhere to. And these are usually formulated in terms of availability and performance and security breaches and stuff like that. In IT service management, we often talk about utility and warranty as being two dimensions of service. Utility is fitness for purpose, more about the functionality. Warranty is fitness for use. Is it available? During which hours? What percentages? Stuff like that. But it's notoriously difficult to define SLAs, service level agreements, that represent reality, because they're often averages. So if you're in the flower selling business, a florist, the day before Valentine's Day, it's really over the period before. It's a really crucial period. If your service provider could keep within their average on that day by giving you a failure, but they're missing the point. So it's extremely, and the trouble is, and when you and certainly when you've packaged service and given it a service level agreement and outsourced it to a company that has no other opportunity to earn money than to do their stuff very efficiently, they will adhere to those service levels. That was the agreement.
Okay. I think this is similar to the, there are four kinds of lies. One is lies, damn lies, absolute lies, and statistics. So I think you come into that statistic because they can be pretty rotten. The SLAs, as you said, if not implemented in spirit and thought.
It's extremely difficult. There's a law, I think it's Goodhart's law, I'm not quite sure. I think Goodhart's law says that whenever you make something explicit, a measurement explicit, intrinsic motivation will be lost.
Yeah.
People will start to game the system, and particularly if there's economic interest involved. So the statement I was making was that SLAs are notoriously difficult to define. We should think very carefully about them, and we should try and extend them. And that's something that's going on in the marketplace at the moment in the industry. People are talking about outcome-based and experience-based metrics. So not the availability of the system, but how much business productivity did it affect?
OKRs and business outcomes. Typically,
so related to business outcomes.
KPIs
and to the experience that people have. What was your experience with this? Were you taken seriously? Do you feel happy? Can your users say IT and smile at the same time? So it's extending that concept from SLAs to what some people call XLAs, experience level agreements.
Yeah. I think that's very difficult to achieve in a way, because like your wow need not be the same as somebody else's wow. But as you rightly said, SLA can be trashed and taken very lightly, as you said, a day before Valentine. But you met your average or the quarter, and what sense does it make when he doesn't need it the most? And so on. That's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, but it's a question of trust. If you got a trusting relationship, if you depend on each other for year after year after year, there'll be give and take, and you will be. There's I forget which company it is, but there's a company that has so much trust in its provider that has so much trust in its customer that they are being vulnerable in saying, customer, you will determine how many business outages, problems were caused by IT, and that is part of our bonus system. Or we get penalties, but it's a subjective. If the business decides that they had a problem that was caused by IT, they don't have to prove it. It's just like Amazon taking me seriously when I said the DHL fouled up the delivery. Yeah, we want to keep doing business with you, and as long as we've got that trust that both parties are taking each other seriously. So it's a shift. It's shift to the more outcome-based, more experience-based metrics, which I think is a good thing.
Okay, but how do you nail these down to precise matrices, or is it, as you said, more in the intangible part of it? Because like the Apple icons are, Steve Jobs said, I want people to fall in love with them, and he made hardware more appealing and all that. So I think this requires the person with the left and the right brain to mix and then come up with these kind of outcomes. because otherwise it's very hard to achieve with a logical, analytical mind, which would precisely only focus on numbers and not the emotions
No,
behind
but
them.
you can formulate things. Typically you'll talk about three measures with in the experience area. You'll talk about CSAT, customer satisfaction
True,
scores,
true, true, true.
on a score from 0 to 10. How satisfied were you with? And then you fill in certain aspects with which you ask the customer, are they satisfied with?
Correct.
You can ask the other crucial one is
Will you
is
refer us or will you refer us to somebody whom you know?
yeah,
Probably
you've
that's
got
another
yeah,
metric.
that's right. That's the third one I was going to mention was the NPS, Net Promoter Score. Will you recommend us as a? But the one in the middle, the second one I often mention is customer effort score. As a customer, how much effort did you have to put into this transaction? Did you have to sort of fight with the provider to get the results you wanted, or did it go pretty seamlessly? So if you think in terms of CSAT, CES, customer effort score, and
NPS.
NPS, net promoter score, that's a reasonably decent way to formalize these kind of things. But I think the best thing is to use these things as discussion points rather than absolute sort of penalty.
Yeah, yeah. Because people
Yeah,
get used to gaming the system once they reach a
yeah.
certain level of a number or
Yeah.
something like
And
that.
and these things will change over time. Once you've measured stuff, that will probably give you insight to start measuring other stuff.
True, true, true,
It's,
true.
a fascinating area.
True. And Mark, one more last thing, I think, before we probably reaching the top of the hour, and wanted to check with you on when you say potentially shippable increments is what gets talked about. You said potentially shippable excrements,
Oh,
and
yeah.
then the business IT
I'd forgotten that.
gelling has got a huge problem there. So,
Yeah.
what exactly do you mean? The DevOps is trying to, of course, iron out those issues to an extent, but still your take on what's your take on why did you call it that way? I mean, is it because there's a lot of fallouts which are not being handled properly? And although Scrum says we'll create the most working software, but working software need not wow the audience, or it need not create business outcome. So, what was your take on why you actually called it that way?
Yeah, well, the excrement bit was just to get a bit of attention to the topic, but
Oh, okay, okay.
there was some truth in there. The agile community, certainly the Scrum community, talks about the definition of done. It's a
True, true,
common
true.
concept. So, when are we done? When are we done? We're done when and the Scrum community often uses the concept of potentially deployable or releasable software increments. So we built something, it is potentially releasable, deployable. The key
Still
word is
potentially, but not, yeah, potentially.
yeah, right. So the key word is potentially. So we've done our stuff, but it's not been shipped yet. It's not shipped into or potentially shippable. Hasn't been shipped into production, which means it could wait for ages. So shouldn't we think about extending our definition of done to not only be deployable, but to have been deployed, to have been shipped and in production? Okay, we'll do that. Yeah, that's better. And I would like to extend it even further, that you're only done, and this is in the spirit of co-creation, that concept of service where consumer and provider do
Okay,
the
okay, okay,
tango, takes two to
okay.
tango.
True.
You're
Because it's
only
still
done.
not gone through the user experience part. That's what you're trying to say.
That's right, that's
So,
right, that's
yeah,
right. Nobody has realized that. It's only done when somebody has actually realized value from it.
it's
Now,
still
of
thrown
course,
over the wall to the operations team and still not gone to the user
no, that's
who's,
right. The system's up and running, but it hasn't been used well. So in if you think about the circles of control, of influence and concern, which are often referenced, this is as an IT provider, this is way beyond your circle of control and influence, certainly, but it is your concern, because if nobody is using your product successfully, it's going to reflect on you. So it's about trying to giving people the bigger picture, making them aware of the other things that happen in the whole ecosystem, and that everything depends on each other. Even if you can't influence it, you will be influenced by these things. So making people cognizant of the bigger picture, getting them out of their silo.
okay, okay.
Yeah.
Mark, any books in the offing? Like, are you planning any other books that you plan to write about the work that you do? Can we expect something probably in a year or two
No,
or something?
I've I've written I think a nice little piece on service experience for Axelos for the itil people. I think that's going to be published as a white paper sometime. I'm quite pleased with that, developing those thoughts on empathy, for instance, and
Okay, okay,
trust.
okay.
That's something, but in terms of books, books not yet. Uh, Certainly encourage people to take a look at the that Seth Godin book. This is Marketing, if they're interested in that. The book
Definitely,
that we
yeah,
have,
yeah.
the book that we haven't touched on, but certainly worth a mention, is the Digital Practitioner Body of Knowledge,
Oh, yeah, yeah. Actually,
which
yes, that's on reading up on that. I chanced with got to talk with Charles Betts, and I'm accredited. I have the license on to consult on DPBOK and train on DPBOK. So I think that led me to Charles because I was reading up on his book Managing Digital, where he's got a reference in that book.
yeah.
So yeah,
No, Charlie's one of our industry's most rigorous thinkers. Greatest respect for Charlie and his thinking. And that
true,
book,
true.
there's so much stuff gone into that book. It's
Yeah, it's like a
absolutely
one-stop place where you can find everything that you would probably need.
no,
So
it's remarkable. It's his opus magnus. That book. It's great.
true. It's still very underrated. As you said, people haven't discovered the value of it yet, but the ones who know are able to derive value
Yeah,
from
well,
it.
you've got to work on it.
True, true.
This isn't just a quick fix. You've got to do some serious thinking. If you're prepared to do some serious thinking, what Charlie's written in that book is so valuable. Really is. Greatest respect for that. So that's certainly a book, somebody else's book worth mentioning.
Sure, sure, sure. And one more thing, Mark, I think before we wind up, what is an advice that you would give to your younger self? What's an easy way to start off as a consultant? Because you were quite smart in inverting yourself as an IT paradigmologist. And how do you think one should aspire to become a successful consultant and thrive at it? So, what is an advice that you would, the life lessons that you would give a younger version of yourself? And what is that what should somebody actually do to reach out to the community out there? How should they be known to people? What's your advice on that?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tricky one. I think uh, you mentioned books that I sometimes joke that if I were to write an autobiography, it would be called "Living Life to Well Within the Limits."
Okay, okay.
I'm a cautious kind of guy, um, and I think the advice to my younger self would be possibly to take more risks.
Oh.
But
Okay.
that's just but it sort of turned out okay for me. Just I'm I've led a lucky life. Um, Certainly, if you take a look around the world and you see the amount of injustice and inequality that people have to deal with, we are so privileged.
True, 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 true. So, how should one actually carve out a niche for himself as a consultant? So, what do you think would be your piece of advice for that? How should they be carving a niche for themselves? Probably join industry bodies like the way you've done, or speak, talk. What do you think should they should be
Yeah,
doing?
share knowledge.
Because I see you've
I
been
think
very active speaker since a large number of years. I think every other conference you're there and you
yeah,
probably attend
so
them.
yeah, last 15 years, I think I've probably done about 20 conferences a year. It's pretty, I've,
Quite a lot. I
it's,
saw in your
it's,
LinkedIn, there's a huge list of,
yeah, no, it's
uh,
pretty big. Yeah. Interesting if I look on Google Maps, it's decided that I work at the airport, the Amsterdam airport, because that was according to their algorithm, that was the place I went to most frequently, which went
okay,
there early in the morning, came back usually in the evening. So yeah, guy must work there. Um, yeah, missed the travel
because
a
of the COVID
bit.
and pandemic. True.
Yeah, but it sort of does make you aware of, gosh, that was an awful lot of traveling. That's not really good for the planet. But speaking about making a position, creating a niche for yourself, I think sharing knowledge and
Blogs, writing, speaking.
yeah, writing, speak, but helping people. I often just extend my hand on. It's the only thing you can do. You just extend your hand. Whether somebody takes your hand is something else. But just being there, and
Okay.
again going back to
How do
what
you
I
actually do it in a practical sense? When you say extend your hand, somebody posts something. Okay, you say you interested, ping me back, or make how do you how do you formally do that?
well, because I'm a content guy, I usually offer a bit of, sort of have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have a look at
Okay.
for instance, Dave Snowden's work, Don Reinertsen, who you mentioned, also great respect for what he's done in the industry.
Correct.
Point people towards additional sources. So you can only help. There's this English saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Drink the one.
I've got a similar one that I've discovered. I can lead you to a thought, but I can't make you think. That's that's up to you. So that's just offering you something, and if it's something that happens to fit into your world at that moment, that's great. Then it helps you. Then that, going back to the Dalai Lama, happiness and usefulness. If I've been useful, then makes me happy, and hopefully makes you happy as well.
True, true. Thanks. I think on that wonderful note of Dalai Lama, I think, Mark, we'll end this conversation. Great talking to you, and thanks a lot for your time. And do look out for brilliant pieces of writing from you. And please do keep inspiring people by means of your talks and writing as you do. I'm sure you'll have enough content and ammunition to write another book.
Yeah, no, certainly I'm not done yet. Thank you for doing some research and reminding me of stuff that I've forgotten.
Okay, okay. Because quite a few things, and where all of these things are really, I was like SLA, disarmament of SLA. I was like, what the hell? Why are we talking like that? But then since you did bring out the aspect of why, what is the intent behind it, I think that clarified a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's nice, Mark. So thank you very much. Have a great week ahead of you, weekend as well, I suppose. So